Hello, everyone. Welcome to Van Life and Chill. My name is Forrest Stevens. I'm your host, and today I'm talking with Joel, and we talk about his amazing electric van. I met up with him a couple years ago to film a van tour with him, and I was blown away by the setup. He has a fully electric van that is solar powered, and I'm serious about that. It's completely solar powered, and it has this array that comes out, and it has about 6,000, I believe, watts of solar coming in when it's fully out, and it's tiltable and all this. And his goal was to go from Alaska to Argentina completely solar powered on renewables and show that this was possible. And so we talk about what that experience has been like so far and some of the challenges that he's faced. They had sort of a catastrophic failure as well in Mexico during the trip, and so what is happening after that, and we get to hear a little bit about how this experience is going and what the actual van life experience is like as well. A lot of this first part of the podcast is a little bit technical about some of the solar, the electrical, some of just the technical aspects of how he made this happen. And so this is interesting to people that want to get a little bit deeper into this world of van life. So I hope you all enjoy, and here it is.
My name's Joel Hayes, and I am, it's so hard to say I am, but I am an environmental scientist turned van lifer. And I like to work around with technology and enjoy nature and all of that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know if that's a good depiction of who I am, but I like to surf, play guitar, travel, all of that sort of good stuff.
And we met a couple years ago in Vancouver. I filmed a van tour of you and Keegan at the time. You were traveling with him, and your van is still easily one of the most unique vans that I've ever filmed. You know, I've filmed over 150 tours, and your van is very unique. Maybe tell us a little bit about the van that you have and what makes it unique.
Yeah, sure. So that's probably more, in line with what we're talking about here, with van life and all of that sort of stuff. Who I am in van life, I in 2018, I embarked on a journey from Alaska to Argentina, but in a completely electric and 100% solar powered van that I built with some friends in Oregon, a company called Solar Roller, and me teamed up for a collaboration, and we constructed this spaceship looking thing with a bunch of solar panels that I was going to drive from Alaska all the way down to Argentina. Well, still am planning on driving from Alaska all the way down to Argentina. But yeah, it's this sort of big sprinter sized van with a bunch of solar panels. And when I say a bunch, it's like, a Mars rover kind of amount of solar panels on it. It's enough to power a vehicle and all of the stuff that goes along inside of it, cooking and charging batteries, lights, and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah. So big solar panel van.
So the van itself, it was sort of originally a fleet van for some company, and it was already electric at the time. And then you upgraded it, like the battery capacity, and then additionally put on the solars. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the van was from California. I bought it up in San Rafael near Silicon Valley and San Francisco, um, just over the bridge, I guess. But the van was owned by Pacific Gas and Electric. Um, these vehicles, it's a international E-Star. It's a 2010 international E-Star. So these vehicles were built, I think, during the Obama presidency, with the EPA. There was some sort of grant or something like that. They were trying to get commercial vehicles to go electric. And so this was sort of a project that, the US government and a few private sector car manufacturers went in for. And they produced these vans. They produced like 500 of them in North America. And a bunch of these companies bought them because they had to get some sort of carbon credit sort of rating or something like that. And fortunately for me, they didn't use my van very much. I bought it, almost brand new. It had, I think, 5,000 miles on the odometer, and it was 20 years old or whatever when I bought it. So yeah, it was a good buy for me, but unfortunately for the environment, they obviously didn't use the van. They used other vehicles for that entire duration. So there was a bit of political sort of stuff going on for my vehicle to exist. So that's where the vehicle came from. It was already electric. It had 100 miles worth of batteries in it. Very underpowered, super slow, sort of old van. Well, old electric van. Uh, that technology is moving so fast now. Old is subjective, right? But anyway, then I bought the van and I took it up to Oregon to Solar Roller headquarters, and we went about creating an off-grid charging system for the vehicle that was mounted to the vehicle on the roof of the vehicle, so that we could charge the van's batteries using solar directly. And the way we did that was we built another battery and used it as a capacitor of sorts, where we charged the solar energy into the battery and then used that energy to charge the onboard drivetrain batteries. That's kind of how we worked around it, because we didn't want to fuck with it too much. And sorry, I didn't mean to say fuck, but we didn't want to mess with it too much, and hope like not destroy the onboard batteries by trying to directly charge them off of solar panels. So that's the reason why we did it that way.
And what kind of voltage was the battery capacity like? Because it when I remember looking at it, you had multiple solar charge controllers, and then you would also have to, like, how did you charge from one battery bank to the other? Was there a voltage change, or was it all sort of the same voltage all the way through?
Yeah, we had just about every voltage possible, every common voltage possible, other than the ability to just like choose what voltage we wanted. We had all of like, 12, 24, 48, and then we even had up to like 380 DC, which is just a huge amount of energy. And then obviously 110 and 240 AC voltage. I don't know how much people know about electricity, but that's basically all of the electricities. um, so yeah, the way it worked was we charged a 40 kilowatt hour battery bank. 40 kilowatt hours is about 2 days worth of power, a little bit under 2 days worth of power for the average American home. We charged a 40 kilowatt hour, 48 volt DC, DC, obviously DC, but battery bank, using solar panels. We had about 7,000, a bit between 7 and 8,000 kilowatts of 7 and 8,000 watts of solar on the roof to charge that bank. And then we used that energy, we inverted it to 240, used that to operate an electric vehicle charger, which then charged the what was it? How many? 80 kilowatt hours of batteries we had under the deck of the vehicle, which is the big battery bank. But yeah, we transformed the energy to alternate current and then back to DC to get it into those batteries again. So there was a lot of steps, which made it quite inefficient. But yeah, ultimately we got the energy there and it was functional. That was the main goal of the project, was to make it functional and get me on the road, and it did that. Yeah, but yeah, it was a mess. It was a bit all over the place. When you saw it, I'm sure you were like, is this safe?
There was a lot going on, that's for sure. It was when you revealed that control panel of all the electrical components, I was like, whoa, this is next level here. There's a lot going on. So I'm curious to know, and these are probably hard statistics for you to have, but how long how many miles could you actually go on a full charge, and how long did it take to charge? Because you were charging predominantly just from this solar array that you had, the 7 to 8,000 watt solar array. How long did it take to charge with something like that, kind of on average? Obviously conditions are always different, but
Yeah. The figures we kind of, and me and Brett does this, with a lot of vehicles. He sort of does these sorts of conversions with a lot of vehicles from Solar Roller. So we kind of crunched some numbers, and Obviously, he doesn't have the complete like road trip real world data that I do because I've been just driving huge distances with these kinds of vehicles. But he does have a lot of like, run around sort of day to day use information. So we kind of congregated a bit of our data together, and we figured out that with a van that size, you could probably average get about 50 miles a day. Some days it's way less and some days it's way more, but it's about 50 miles a day, which is what in kilometers are 70, 80 kilometers, I think 80 kilometers a day, something like that. So yeah, it's quite significant amount of distance if you take in consideration what it is that you're driving. But for like the average diesel sprinter van lifer, it's not very much distance at all. But so and then if we wanted to go full range, um, up to 200 miles was like ideal. It was usually more around like 160 miles. And once again, I'm in miles. I'm not doing kilometers. I don't know what that is. Like just over 200 and something kilometers. Um, that's like an average sort of distance that we could go, and that's with a stop in the middle and a charge for about 4 hours to transfer the remaining energy in the 40 kilowatt hours to our 80 kilowatt hour pack. So you'd stop for a good lunch break and put that energy away, and then you'd save some because when you get to the spot, you want to have a bit of energy to, boil water or cook some food or something like that. But that's, minimal amount compared to what you're using to charge the vehicle. So yeah, that's sort of what, and then it took what, 2.5, 3 days to charge that. Um, that's in ideal conditions. Once again, it was usually more around 4 days, 4 or 5 days. And then sometimes, the pleasure of the place took over and you ended up staying longer than what you needed anyway. So like you said, it changes and it's all very diverse. All of these figures change completely depending on how you're feeling and what you want to get out of the situation. If you want to like crush it, then of course you could, travel probably every 4 days you could travel about 160 miles, something like that. And if you wanted to just do it every day, you could probably go 50 miles a day. But yeah, it's a lot of work. Well, it was a lot of work to set this thing up and pull it. It was all manual. That was one of the big problems, was you had to stop. And as we showed you, for us, when we set it up in Vancouver, you had to pull all of the wings out, and then you actually didn't see it when we fixed the tracking. So we had some actuators that we mounted to the side, and you could tilt the solar panels so that they could get more yield from the sun. So that was an extra step, which took another, 5 or 10 minutes to set up. So, when you rock up in a van to somewhere and you just kind of want to, you've been driving, you want to kind of like sit on the beach or do nothing or, read a book or just do anything but be in the van or be focused on something, you had to get out and set the thing up. And so cruising that 50 miles a day would just kind of get exhausting for me, but maybe if someone had a bit of a more of a mission mentality, they'd feel a bit more comfortable doing that. So yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's not exactly a perpetual motion situation where you can just drive and you have your solar panels on the roof. You did have some solar panels always accessible, but like you said, you had to sort of move the sort of assemble your array and so that you could essentially triple the amount of electricity you were getting in. And then plus you had some satellite panels as well that on the back, and then that you could take out and arrange so that they were positioned towards the sun as well. So it'd be, yeah, I can imagine quite a bit of work to set this up and then take it down and then drive. It's quite a bit of work you had to do.
Yeah, and then a lot of the times like you'd set it up and then just like it was so roughly wired in, there was no real permanency to it. And so whenever you're working with those small little connections, they get, oxidation in them, and one connection wouldn't work, which would throw the voltage out of the whole thing. So you'd be up there like scraping these little blade connectors so that they would all work, or something would break because it's traveling down the road and rattling, and yeah, which kind of got, yeah, it was never sometimes, you would set up and it would just be done and you're like, yay, like that's effort enough in its own, but then you're like, what the fuck is wrong with this thing now? Like, you're up there with a soldering iron, like putting like 10 times the amount of solder on it so that it so that it stays together and you don't have to ever do it again. But yeah, it was good. It was good. It was a good patience tester. That's for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. So where did you actually take the van? You got it in California, took it to Oregon, and then you took it to Alaska, and then from there, where did you go? I mean, that already is a pretty big trip. Quick little interruption from the podcast. I just wanted to let everybody know that I'm doing a cross country road trip in our camper van this year, and I want to meet up with as many van dwellers as possible to film van life tours for different media. So if you want to get your van featured on different media and get your social medias out there and show your lifestyle and showcase what you've built and what you've created, please get in contact with me. My contact information is in the description below, and I would love to meet up with you and film with you. And I think that would just be a fun time. So reach out to me and let's make this happen. So, where did you actually take the van?
That was a huge trip in itself. That's like a trip of a lifetime for some people, and it was for me too. I was just like, well, this is the beginning, and I've seen so much. Yeah, so I bought it in California, built or did the modifications in Portland, sorry, in Oregon, Ashland, Oregon. Then I drove it to Washington, just below Vancouver. I forget what the town is, but there's like a ferry terminal there.
Port Angeles.
Yeah, yeah, that's it, Port Angeles. And then put it on the ferry, and the ferry took me all the way up to a place called Haines, Alaska. Um, then I got off the ferry at Haines, Alaska, and drove up to Fairbanks, which is where I picked Keegan up, who was the camera guy slash journalist on the trip. And then we drove to the Arctic Circle and turned around and charged it and started driving south from there. Um, and we drove all the way through Alaska, the interior of Alaska, to the Yukon, and then British Columbia, and then down into the USA along the west coast through California, and then into Baja California, which is where we ended up at the pandemic. And with the accident, the van was in an accident. In a windstorm. Well, we got caught in a windstorm, and all the solar panels got ripped off the roof and scattered across the highway down there, which was really devastating at the time. And it's been years, actually, which is the craziest thing. It's been years, and that time has just gone so fast. I think it's been like 2 years now. Um, yeah, this pandemic has really changed the way that time is for a lot of people, including myself. So yeah, it was in an accident down there, and then I just sat in Mexico for a while trying to gather the resources during a pandemic to try and fix it, and just wasn't happening. So, I ended up meeting some people online who wanted to help out. There's a guy in Miami, his name's Shane, who really liked the project and just had some resources spare. So he's trying to help out with it all. But yeah, kind of underfunded still, and still in a pandemic. So there's a lot stopping us from continuing. But the plan is to get the solar panels back on the roof and up and running again.
Wow. So yeah, that's a devastating hit, that windstorm. What was the state of like the solar array? Was it completely unusable after that damage that happened, or was it sort of like limping along, or what was the state?
We gathered all of the stuff, like basically bits of metal and like aluminum and the panels. The panels are like these flexible. They're flexible solar panels. So if the watchers or listeners know anything about solar panels, they're the ones that don't have glass on them, and they have a bit of give. You can kind of flex them almost 180 degrees, almost. But that's like a slow flex. What happened is the thing came off the roof and it hit the ground so hard that they just like hit with sudden impact and they shattered. The actual the the cells in the solar panels shattered. But like a split solar cell doesn't mean that it's dysfunctional. It's it can still work almost to 100% capacity as long as there's like connectivity in between that cell. So I was hopeful. We took it back to like it was crazy. We like met these people who were like, yeah, we can help. My brother knows a guy who knows a guy, and we're like, oh my god, this is crazy. So we're following these guys down a dirt road, and they're like, we've got a workshop, like all obviously all in Spanish. We've got a workshop, and we're just following them down a dirt road, and they lead us to this lot, which is fine. That was great. They were so helpful. But yeah, it seemed super dodgy, and we basically employed five or so people to help out with putting it back together, and they were there like hammering like aluminum and heating it up and straightening it all and putting it back together. So I was hopeful that it would work again, hopeful enough that I employed people to help me do it. And we got it all pretty much back together and functional. It was obviously not as good as before. There were cracks in all the solar panels, and didn't cost that much. I think it ended up costing like $300 or something to get it back to that state. I mean, yeah, its wages are so minimal in Meccan. We were really, paying good money to these people just obviously because we could. So they were happy, we were happy, and then anyway, we left with all the solar panels, and I drove back to another friend's house in the area, and we parked in their lot, and I pulled the array out and I was inspecting it, and I rewired it all back together, and I spent a lot of time just to make sure that like nothing was wrong. And it was like coming back, we're getting at least 30% of the original values of yield, solar yield, which is not like it's not completely devastating. At least it was still somewhat functional. So I was happy about that, and I was slowly trickle charging the batteries. And we went, actually, Keegan had decided at that point in time that he wanted to leave the project. So I went to drop him off at I borrowed a friend's car. I dropped him off at the bus station, and which was, sad and all of that, but, it was cool. It was like the project moving in all sorts of directions. And by the time I got back, the solar panels had all caught on fire. Because what happens when you get a cracked cell is that a bunch of heat accumulates in that cracked area, and the plastic and the stuff that encases the cell has the ability to catch on fire, not the cell itself. The cell just gets hot because it's conducting electricity. So yeah, they burst in flames, and all of the plastic was melting, and that was a bit of a disaster. And so at that point in time, I was like, yeah, maybe they're 30% capacity, but obviously unusable, because if that happens in a remote area, you're pretty screwed. So yeah, that's when I decided that it was time to pack up and redo this thing properly. I mean, the blessing in disguise is that it was a chance to redo the thing in a better way. And driving from Alaska to Mexico on renewable energy is it's not a small feat. Like, that's a pretty big deal, I think, anyway, and I feel quite proud of that. But yeah, it was a chance to do things properly and use, in three, like I said earlier, in 3 years or 2 years, that's a lot of time for technology. It's such an exponential growth pattern technology has. So it was a chance to reinvestigate all of this stuff again and potentially do it way better and bring on partners and organizations and stuff. I mean, obviously very exhausting, but still, like, you got to try and see some silver linings in it all. And so that's what I've been trying to do lately, is sort of bring it back to that and redo it. So we got some new plans for the array, which are being delayed, time after time. But a sponsor came on, SunPower, which is the largest solar panel manufacturer in North America, which is just huge. Their solar technology partners, Maxion, actually are the ones who are sponsoring us, and a Mexican company called Galt Energy co-sponsored us a new set of solar panels. So we have all of the new solar panels. Now we just need to figure out a way to mechanize them. So what I want to do is make it not manual this time. I want to make it automatic so that you can get out and it's not that exhausting process of setting things up and, not wanting to, not wanting to set things up really. That was kind of like the thing. Just get out, kind of press a couple of buttons and the whole thing comes out. I wanted to make it lighter and more flexible as well and secured, better secured, so that it can withstand the Patagonia wind because I've heard that the wind down there gets pretty ripping. So pretty keen to make it stronger.
That's really cool. And yeah, congrats on the sponsorship. That is awesome to hear. That's news to me. That's really cool. So I guess, yeah, my question is what was the point of the trip, or what was sort of the goal of Route del Sol, and what was sort of the mission behind this trip from Alaska to Argentina?
The whole trip itself is kind of like, well, it is a statement. It's just to show the world how capable we are with current technology to provide, global energy systems with renewable energy. It's kind of just like a simple statement. If I can drive from Alaska to Argentina with things that I bought off the internet, on renewable energy, then why can't we operate society, completely off of renewable energy? Which I still find to be true today, and probably even more true. And actually, even a lot has changed since I started the trip too, which is great. It's good to see that there's progress being made, but we're hoping it's not too little, too late, kind of the kind of story. But yeah, the goal is to show the world that we can operate society off of renewable energy completely, and there's no reason for us to not do that. And then also just to show an alternative way of living and have fun and enjoy nature and reconnect with the things that I believe are really important to the human spirit, the human, yeah, the human side of us that I think is lost in sort of the concrete society we live in. Yeah.
Right. Well, you have this overarching idea of what the trip means, but there's also just you going on this really amazing adventure as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
yeah, maybe just what is it about that? Like, was there must have been those two sort of drives for you to do this, but why choose sort of this adventure travel idea to make this statement? Was there some part of you that just wanted to do some traveling, or is that something that you've always kind of wanted to do, was travel like this?
Yeah, totally. It's one thing that is really, it's hard because I definitely question myself. I'm not opposed to, people saying that it's a ridiculous sort of thing, because it kind of is. It's a bit privileged really to just like grab this van and load it up with solar panels. There's a lot of stuff that a lot of people can't afford, and live this life, this escapism lifestyle. So yeah, I mean, totally. A lot of it is kind of just selfishly driven. I don't know how selfish in this grand scheme of things, it's not really that selfish, but really it is. It's ultimately, it was a big part of it is just for my own pleasure and my own exhilaration in life and adventure. Um, and I'm trying to I've tried to grapple with those thoughts, whether that's fair or not, but I think ultimately it is. I think it's a if I'm going to spend my money, the money that I've earned in this capitalistic society, I'm glad that I'm spending it on something like this. But yeah, um, there is a bit of a contradiction there. It's not just all about the environment and saving the world, and choosing to do it in this way too is kind of a little bit funky. I have it on YouTube and I show it off kind of thing to the world. There's probably a lot of ways that you could make a difference without building a solar powered van. You could you could do a number of things. There could be a million different. You could get more involved in political change or social change, or there's a number of things that you could do. You don't have to build a solar powered van to make a difference. And yeah, there's some contradictions there, but I'm glad I did it, and I'm doing it. And um, I have this thing that I say to myself, that contradictions are everywhere, and as long as you feel uh, good about what you're doing, which is kind of hard because that's obviously, like, good to me is different to good to somebody else. But I really still think that it's really valuable to feel good about what you're doing, and really know that it's good deep down inside, not just like, oh yeah, it's good. No, you have to really know, like, this is a good thing that I'm doing. And if you know that, then you're not doing anything wrong. You're just trying to enjoy life like everybody else is just trying to enjoy life with the resources that you have available to you.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, you're using your time and your resources to pursue this, and a lot of people just do completely luxury travel, but at least you have a message behind this. And in my eyes, it's very inspiring to see that this is possible, and the fact that you're actually showcasing it, and you're showcasing it well on your YouTube as well, I think is valuable. I think that, you know, that's what we can do as humans, is we can create stuff, and what you're doing is you're just pushing the boundaries of what's possible, and so you can inspire other people to push those boundaries even further, and create better and more renewable resources. I mean, that's in the realm of what you're doing. So to me, it's very, very inspiring what you're doing, for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, appreciate that.
I'm curious to get to know you a little bit more, Joel, and I'm always curious to figure out kind of the types of people that end up going this route and living in a van and traveling, people that travel in a van. So I'm just curious, like, what was your upbringing like?
I had a quite an adventurous upbringing. Um, we did a lot of, like, car. My dad owned a four-wheel drive Land Cruiser, and I grew up in Australia, in sort of on the border of two states named Queensland and New South Wales, which are subtropical sort of climate. So a lot of outdoor activity, hiking, and all that sort of stuff. But we would go camping in the four-wheel drive a lot. Like, we'd just go on big trips up into the tropics, and um, yeah, just like, I think I can remember being like a 9-year-old kid sleeping under a tarp, in crocodile infested sort of estuarine areas, and just like walking beaches and like pulling oysters off rocks like this big, and fishing and all that sort of stuff. Like, spearfishing was big, and surfing, and so I had quite an adventurous sort of campy upbringing. Um, Pretty tumultuous too. Like, there was a lot of sort of personal household things that weren't really great in my existence too. So it wasn't all just like rainbows and butterflies. But um, yeah, I had a real. I think, like, my spark for nature and experiencing things outside of sort of just like the household lifestyle, sort of domestic lifestyle, came from that place. Um, I was also a little bit different to my family, and everybody's individual in their family unit, but I was individual in the way, like, my family were devout Christians, Pentecostal Christians, which I'm not. I gave up that a long time ago, but sort of raised that way. But I had a lot of questions. I was very scientifically minded. Even just as a young kid, I would ask a lot of questions about a lot of things, and they were in a Christian family unit. When you ask sort of scientific questions, you don't really get scientific answers. You get sort of things that don't really make sense, which you don't know as a kid. You sort of just have to believe what you're told. So I had a lot of questions, um, and about the world, and about nature, and how things work, and all that sort of stuff. So I was quite curious too, just individually speaking. Um, so yeah, I think I brought that into my adulthood, and just always had this thirst for knowledge and experience, as well as like a very practical, hands-on background in, you know, technical sort of like, you know, camping. And it's not for everybody because they're out of their skill or comfort level. And for me, it was just not, you know, I was in my skill and comfort level. I felt very comfortable in those sort of rough environments. But yeah, but also with the added curiosity of looking at a leaf and noticing something different about the veins on that leaf, or yeah, just all of that sort of cool stuff. So yeah,
And what did you study in school as well? You studied.
I went to Griffith University on the Gold Coast in Australia, and I studied climate change adaptation and ecotourism. So it's a Bachelor of Science. You start out with all the core sciences, chemistry, biology, um, math, that sort of stuff. And then sort of towards the second year, you start to branch off into your majors, which is, you know, pretty true for most of the Western world. Um, so yeah, not unlike Canada or the USA in that regard. So we branched off, and then I chose to do climate change adaptation as my major, which is kind of a political science sort of degree. Before I started university, I worked at an ecology firm as an environmental ecologist, a terrestrial ecologist. So I had a lot of sort of knowledge about, uh, you know, zoology and botany and ecology, and just like its the functional way that it actually works in the physical world. And when I went to university, I thought, well, why would I study that? I already know, you know, physically how that works in the real world. I want to study something that I don't know. So I chose political science, climate change adaptation, which is really hard because, you know, you're studying environmental law and all of this sort of stuff that just is, it's, you know, you bring in humanities and stuff like that into it, which is super complex. It's not something that's easily studied or understood, and I don't think it ever will be. But you know, we attempt to, as humans, do that in institutions like universities. So yeah, I was doing a lot of environmental law and stuff like that. And then the ecotourism was a bit businessy, like there was a lot of business sort of related study involved in all of that too. So yeah, quite a broad spectrum education. It wasn't really in depth in any particular thing, which I really appreciate now, um, as an adult. And having worked a few professional roles, I've really used those skills to make my way through my career, and also moving forward into things like Route del Sol, where you know, I can use all of the skills that I have to create a project and run away with it, kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. How did the idea for Route del Sol come about? Like, was there some, like, I'm very curious how it developed into the idea of a solar powered electric vehicle traversing this specific path. How did that idea come into your mind?
Yeah, it was bit by bit. It wasn't just like a light bulb moment. It was like things that just accumulated sort of over and over. I I was living in Vancouver at the time, where I think I like kind of created the rough holistic idea of doing this trip exactly how I planned on doing it. But at the time I was working night shifts, so I just had a lot of time to think. I yeah, just thinking a lot about what I wanted to do and the adventures I wanted to take. And I knew I wanted to do some sort of big adventure. So I kind of got infatuated with the idea of traveling from Alaska to Argentina. I just thought that was just spectacular. What a brilliant geographical area to get to know. You know, like it's just so much diversity in that space of geography. Um, so that was like something that I really. There was a few people I'd seen. There was this show Red Bull produced, Red Bull Media House, called Brothers on the Run. It was about two famous snowboarders, John and Eric Jackson brothers from Alaska, and they wanted to do the trip, and just, you know, surf the whole way. And Red Bull was going to pay for it. And I just was like, that's amazing. Imagine getting Red Bull to just pay for a trip like that. It was so cool. So yeah, I had like that, escapism sort of introduction to it all. So that's where that came from. And then the solar powered electric thing was, um, well, electric vehicles at the time were starting to proliferate more than what they had ever proliferated. I know it's been like a long process for that to come about, but um, they were starting, Tesla was really starting to gain traction, and Elon Musk was becoming more and more a household name, around at least North America. I know in Australia and England at the time, people had no idea who he was and what Tesla was, which was really interesting for me. I was like, this company's becoming so big. And I wish like I knew to throw some money down at that time, because that would have been the best time to buy Tesla stock. But obviously, I was too young and I had my eyes on different prizes at the time. But yeah, nobody knew about him in Australia or England. I'd traveled between those two places quite a bit in that time. But here it was starting to proliferate like greatly. And I was like, that's cool. Like, I like electric vehicles and I like, what they're all about. Um, and I was like, imagine doing this trip in an electric vehicle. Like, I wonder if that's even possible. How could that even happen? And do they even make electric vehicles that are, not sedans and all of that sort of stuff? And so I was like, oh, that's cool. And I started, and I was like, okay, you can do like electric conversions. You can make like a Volkswagen van that's electric, and that's cool. And then I was like, okay, so maybe I'll do that trip in an electric vehicle. And I was like, cool. And then I was like, how the hell am I going to charge it? Like, how is that even going to be possible? Like, between those two places, there's just so much vast, that like nothing, well, nothing as far as infrastructure goes, but like a lot of nature, but nothing to charge a van, that's for sure. And I was like, can you charge these things off of solar panels? And I think I like started YouTubing it. And like I said, I had a lot of time. It was on night shift. So I would just sort of spend my free time just like researching this idea.
I was on the internet looking at people plugging Nissan Leafs into solar panels and like, doing these DIY projects on YouTube. And eventually I came across this guy named JJ Garcia, who was sort of the only guy at the time doing anything about batteries, and well, the only guy I knew. He was pretty big, talking about batteries and solar and, off-grid sort of stuff, but sort of more to do with electric vehicles, because he had done a few conversions with VW buses. So I messaged him with my big idea, can I solar power a van and drive it from Alaska to Argentina? And he was like, I think it's really funny because when you message somebody or email somebody, you kind of lose that face to face. You can't see half of the communication because it's text. But I think he like facetiously messaged me back saying, yeah, sure, it's totally possible. You just need this amount of solar panels and this amount, like an outrageous amount of energy to do it. And I was like on the other end going, I got a yes. Like, I'm so stoked. Some guy who knows something about this said it's possible. But like, I think he fully meant that like it's possible, but it's absolutely ridiculous. Like, I don't know. And I've spoken to him since about that. I went on his podcast not that long ago, and he doesn't remember it. I don't, he's such a busy guy. But for me, it was just like such a huge part of the story that it was so funny. He kind of had a little laugh about it. He was probably, yeah, like I was probably being facetious, like, but yeah, it was really funny. So anyway, I got a yes from him, um, and that's when I was like, okay, like this is possible, like this can be done. And then I came across Brett from Solar Roller and saw that he'd actually done the whole thing. Like he's charging vehicles off of solar panels and keeping the whole thing mobile. The solar panels move with the vehicle and the batteries and all of that sort of stuff. So that was really heartwarming. It was really great because I, found my crowd, my tribe. And as soon as I messaged Brett about it, he was just like over the moon. he was stoked. He was like, that is such a cool idea. Like, obviously the solar panel van thing was like something he'd already come up with, and me independently had sort of come up with, but not as developed as him. But he was like, the combination of the two is just such a brilliant way to bring like the purpose of a vehicle like this together with a purpose. Like, you know, the purpose of driving a long distance with a vehicle like this really kind of proves its capabilities. And he's like, you know, obviously it's not for everybody. So if somebody wants to do it, he was stoked. He was like, yeah, if you want to fucking, I've got kids and a wife. Like, I couldn't see us doing that. And so, yeah, he was so stoked, and we really hit it off, and that really made things move really quickly. You know, we started planning this project, and that's when it sort of came about. But yeah, slowly. It wasn't like I said, it wasn't a light bulb moment. And I think like one of the real important things about project development and management of any kind is sort of going through those stages. I think one thing a lot of people sort of expect when they start projects is that things just happen, and they don't. They never just happen. It's always something. In any project that I've worked on, it's like it takes a lot of hard work, and you've got to kind of climb ladders, so to speak, and which sucks, but it's just part of it. You know, if you want something to happen, you got to do the work, and so I don't like to kill people's joy. Like, I think people are looking, and I'm not suggesting that that's what you're looking for, but people, when they ask that question, they're looking for like something sparkly or some sort of like thing that's different about me that made it, you know, possible. And for sure, like the culmination of all of these ideas and things that made me and rah, 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 and all of that sort of made it possible. But there's nothing just clicked and made it happen. It was just a bunch of slow, tedious work, like night shift. You know, I spent a lot of hours on this idea, jotting things down in notebooks and researching. And the internet is an amazing place. It's just pretty much got anything you could ever want on it, which is just so cool. It's like that.
Yeah.
What's Bo? I don't know if you watch Bo Burnham, his new latest special Inside, but I love that song about the internet. A little bit of everything all of the time. That's the internet.
Right.
It's just such an amazing resource, but it can be used to like he was talking about how you could see the whole cast of Harry Potter naked if you wanted to. Like, what a ridiculous thing to use the internet for, but here we are using it for that. Or you can use it to build a solar powered electric vehicle. It can be used for good and weird pleasure.
That's cool. That's a good testament of what the internet is possible of doing, is helping you create this project. And that's the case with everything that you see that's a finished result. Is there's all the time beforehand and all of the different ideas that accumulate. Oh, this will work, this won't, and how it actually pans out. And it's interesting to have watched your journey from at least when I met you in Vancouver until now, and how there's continuing to be, you know, there's all the complications of getting something like this even set up to begin with, but then now you're dealing with the breakdown of it happening and the rebuilding and the redesigning, and it's very interesting to watch this whole project continue on. We've talked a lot about sort of Route del Sol and what you've been doing, but we haven't actually talked very much about van life. So I'm very curious to what it was actually like living in this van for you during the time from Alaska to Mexico. What was it like living in the van?
Yeah, I like this. This is cool because this is totally another part of the whole project, and it's more accessible for a lot more people. Just the whole alternate living in a van, specifically lifestyle. Yeah, I love it. We touched on my background and sort of the not rough upbringing, but the ability to rough it as a child. Sleeping under the stars and in the wild and all of that sort of stuff. So living in a van as opposed to that is just like luxury. it's such a good feeling. But for some people, you know, it could be really gross. It could be really hard for them. But for me, my experience, I love it. I think if I could convince more people to do it, I would. You know, it's such a beautiful thing to just have like this home, this little home with you everywhere you go. It's nothing like getting out of the cold surf and coming home like steps away from the beach and putting on a hot cup of tea or coffee and just chilling, and it's just right there. You don't have to drive like anywhere to get it. You don't have I don't know. Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know how else to put it, but yeah, it's great. Just the accessibility to all the things I love, and also, you know, it comes with its challenges too. It's not like it's all butterflies and rainbows for sure. It's if you work online, the internet's hard to get by. If you're traveling internationally, there's all sorts of, you know, because driving down to Central and South America is going to pose a lot of challenges to me, you know, crossing borders and doing all of the paperwork and insurance and languages and all of that sort of stuff is complicated, as opposed to flying into those places. Obviously, it's very standard to cross the border if you fly in through an airport. But yeah, a bit more nerve-wracking driving across. What else? There's lots, you know, using the bathroom. That's always a huge one for people. I'm totally okay with, you know, digging a deep hole and going that way, but you know, I had a toilet in my van, and I actually demolished it because I never used it. I was like, I don't want this. And a lot of people were just they were like, what? Why did you do that? You know, and I was like, well, I never used it. I just don't mind going in nature. It's just like, it's for me almost better. But yeah, a lot of people sort of question that, but you know, I think I'm well suited for the lifestyle. You know, with the preface that it's not for everybody as well. But yeah, I really, really, really enjoy it. I like it a lot. I think it's great. Oh, it's cheap too. Cheap's great. Cheap's the thing about the way that I'm doing it is that I don't pay gas bills, like petroleum gas bills. My costs all happened at the start, and it's quite costly to do a solar powered electric van. I can definitely vouch for that. But you know, the on-road costs are just so minimal for me. I don't pay gasoline. You know, a gasoline bill is just like ridiculously, you know, it's a huge bill for a van lifer, but I don't pay that. But, you know, even if you did have to pay a gas bill as opposed to paying for rent and all of that, you know, insurance and all of the stuff that you have in there, the electricity and heating and all of that sort of stuff is quite expensive. So yeah, it's cheap. It's a cheap way to live. Yeah, I don't know. What else can I add? It's great. I like it.
What were some of the memorable experiences that you had during your trip?
One was seeing the Northern Lights. That was pretty cool, with the luxury of having your little cabin van right there that you could go into, because it's usually pretty cold when you can see the Northern Lights. You have to have pretty clear skies, which are usually associated with pretty cold temperatures. So yeah, it was really nice to have the van there and just step outside and see just this crazy dancing auroras over your head. That was really nice. I think for me, the biggest thing, the most memorable and enjoyable experience of the van is just the community and the people that I met along the way. Whether it be other van lifers or just people who wanted to support you in your choice of the way that you lived your life, whether they had families and it wasn't really accessible to them, for them at that current point in time in their lives, or whether they were just, you know, people who just wanted to help. They wanted to give you a place to have a shower and some internet access, or introduce you to somebody who could help you in some way repairing something, or show you a cool spot. Or, you know, there was just so many different different people that just really made the trip amazing. It was really cool. The whole way, you know, from the moment I got off the ferry in Alaska, well, even before, but like on the trip, the moment I got off the ferry in Alaska, like I met this lady named Rosemary. It was about maybe an hour into the trip, and I pulled over to the side of the road to pull the panels out and charge for the first time. And it was very stressful because the way we built the van, we built it so quickly, I didn't really get a chance to test it. And so I was like, oh my God, I don't know if this is going to work. And there's grizzly bears everywhere and rah, rah, rah. Like I was sort of freaking out. And this lady pulls over the side of the road, and it's just like, obviously, because the van is so crazy too, she was like, what is this? You know? And I was like, it's an electric vehicle. And she's like, my son, you know, loves electric vehicles. My brother in Toronto has one of these Teslas. Like it was like really cool. And she invited me into her home, and that was within 1 hour of like starting the journey. So, you know, it was just like such a omen to what was to come. Even, you know, right down into Mexico, following those guys after the accident, following those guys to that lot, you know, they didn't have to help. There was no reason for them. They just, for some reason, did. And I just loved that. I loved that part of living, of this lifestyle. Just really getting back into this mobile community. It's not like, yeah, communities are everywhere, and we kind of forget that. We get stuck in our own little community and cliques, and you don't realize that there's just so many of them out there, so many friend groups and so many different types of people who live in such different ways. But I think at the core, we all, well, the vast majority of us are the same, in that we want to help each other and be a community and yeah, make things possible for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you touched on something there. I mean, you must have gathered just a lot of attention from just having to set up constantly. And I'm curious, like, how much of that was like positive, like you talked about with Rosemary, and how much, like, did you receive any negative attention with just sort of like taking up a little bit of square footage with the array and with your van at any points?
Yeah, there was none of that. Like that was one of the things I was like, this whole solar thing probably couldn't work if we were all doing it, because, you know, just the space that would be required in parking lots. Our parking lots just aren't big enough for it. But that, obviously, it was like the only one on the road. So like I have the luxury of just being very well received in that regard. People were just like, what is that? Actually, do you want me to move my car so that you can set it up, kind of thing? For the most part, I don't think I ever had someone, you know, other than police officers just doing their job, I don't think I ever had someone say, that's disgusting, get it out of here, kind of thing, which was really cool. But, you know, like, to go back to the point that it was kind of stressful and annoying to have to set this thing up, and having people in your space while you're working constantly. It did, like, you know, I would park in places sometimes because I knew that I was going to get hounded, and I didn't want that. And I would try to get, you know, out of the public eyesight so that I could do that, and people would still find you, you know, and they'd want to talk to you because it's the first time they've ever seen this thing, and it's exciting for them. And I get that, but it's not the first time I've seen it. I've been messing with this kinky solar system that just doesn't want to work properly for thousands and thousands of miles. So it was quite annoying in that regard. But, you know, you've got to try to keep a positive attitude about it. And it was really good to have Keegan there. I think Keegan had a little less stress than I did about the whole thing, because he was great. He got a good lesson in electricity and, you know, the dangers of it and all of that. But I don't think it clicked as hard as it does for me in that regard. Like, I was very aware of how dangerous this thing was, and, you know, how finicky it was and all the things that could go wrong with it. So I was a little bit more stressed than he was about it. So when it came to dealing with members of the public, he was always just like, I've got it. And he loved it. It was really good. So he would get out and explain things to people over and over and over again. And he'd have his little his like presentation and all that sort of stuff, and it was really good to have that sort of thing. But yeah, that's probably like the only negative thing for me when when I was alone, just sort of dealing with that. But it's not really a negative thing. It was more me than it was anybody else. It was just me sort of being grumpy, I guess.
Just a challenge. Yeah. I mean, that's to come with it, of course. And I'm sure there's times, of course, where it was like you really valued the fact that there were people interested in what you were doing, obviously.
Yeah. More often than not, that was the thing I really liked. And, and sometimes it came out with some confrontational conversations with people who obviously didn't necessarily believe in solar as a viable source of energy for the future, and I liked that. I think that was great. Obviously, like, it gets a bit much if you're arguing with someone in a parking lot about solar power, and you've just driven from Alaska to wherever the fuck you are with a solar powered vehicle. It gets kind of annoying, and that it's pretty hard to argue. And I liked that. I was like, well, take a look to your left, Exhibit A, this stuff works, So it was cool. It was a good arguing point. And I think ultimately there was always something for somebody, no matter how negative or, positive was a pretty prevalent sort of attitude people had towards the whole project. But when you did get the negative, there was always something that they could get down on, whether it was the vehicle itself or the journey or my attitude or Keegan's attitude. There was always something, for them to be excited and happy about, which was really nice. Yeah, it was really nice to enjoy that.
That's awesome. So what's next for you, Joel?
What's next for me? I am gonna hopefully in the next year or so get this thing back on the road, and I don't really have any crazy plans beyond that. Just make some money and make it happen. I might travel around the USA and do a little bit of a tour around here before I head off to South America again and get my wheels back underneath me, so to speak. But that's the plan for the next little bit, and just keep pushing on, and personally and professionally, and try to make the most of this life that I'm living, that I've been given. Or I don't know what the correct way to say that is, but yeah, just to make the most of this life.
Yeah. And where can people follow you?
On social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and I think you can just type in Root Del Sol into ROUTEDELSOL into the search bar of any of those, and it'll pop up. But it's at Root Del Sol, or on YouTube, it's youtube.com/the Root Del Sol van. And that's how you find me.
And you have a website as well, rootdelsol.com, is that right?
Exactly, yeah, rootdelsol.com.
All right. Well, thanks so much for your time today, Joel. It was great talking to you. And for me, it was really insightful to actually get a little more into the real kind of technical parts. Because when we filmed the van tour, I just wasn't able to get that deep into it. So yeah, it was great to hear some of the technical aspects that went into such a cool van build.
Yeah, cool. I'm glad you got more out of it.
Thanks everyone for watching and listening. I sure hope you enjoyed this podcast. I'm sure if you got all the way to the end that you did. And if you want to see more, we release new podcasts every single Thursday, and we have an archived podcast popping up right now.